Thank you very much, and thank you to the WGS for hosting this incredible event and an opportunity to celebrate one of the most exciting times in human history. Everything, everywhere, all at once, in aviation is changing. From this utopian future of flying cars from the Jetsons to our packages being delivered to our homes via drones, from autonomous flying airplanes and hydrogen-powered airplanes. All of this is converging and changing real time. And we are so fortunate today to have two leaders from the industry representing two very, very significant companies. One, Joby Aviation with Jobin, and Adam Grosser, who has multiple hats, but today his hat that he's wearing is chairman of Google Wing, Google's drone delivery company, to share about the way that Google has gotten into the aviation business. So first I'll start with Jobin. Jobin, it's good to see you.
Just like to say how grateful I am to His Excellency and the entire team at RTA who've been working tirelessly back all the way since 2017 to bring this moment together where we're able to bring the three critical pieces, the infrastructure, the regulatory environment, and the aircraft together such that we can launch the air taxi service that His Excellency has envisioned and planned, and it's just fantastic to now have a definitive agreement. Again, we've been working on it for a long time, and the partnership with the RTA has been spectacular. The RTA's leadership and showing that they can pull together all the pieces that are necessary faster than any other place in the world is just fantastic.
It's pretty special. So before we dive into the region, why don't we share with the group a little bit about Joby. What is it that you do? Tell us about this magic flying machine you've created.
So this is a dream that I've had since I was a little boy. Like many of you probably also have dreamed of being able to rise above traffic and fly to where you want to go. And I worked on it back 30 years ago in 1993 when I was in college. I had a view that with electric propulsion we could build aircraft that were faster, safer, quieter, and that it was the critical unlock to making vertical takeoff and landing aircraft possible. Unfortunately, at that point in time, lithium-ion batteries were in their infancy. They were still in the lab. They hadn't been released as a product yet. And so we were with nickel metal hydride, nickel cadmium batteries at about 40 or 50 watt-hours a kilogram. The first generation of lithium-ion batteries were promising 70 watt-hours a kilogram, and with that you can't build a very useful flying machine. So I put my dreams on hold and then came back to them 15 years later when we had batteries that were getting close to 200 watt-hours a kilogram. And today we have batteries in production at 300 watt-hours a kilogram, and there are cells in the lab at more than 400 watt-hours a kilogram. So it's really exciting to see the progress that's being made in battery technology. And so that has enabled the creation of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. In our case, it's an air taxi. It can carry a pilot and 4 passengers at speeds of more than 300 kilometers an hour. And we see it as an incredibly exciting opportunity to connect between places in cities in a fast and efficient way, and then over time to, with the addition of new technologies to extend the range and create vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that can connect regions.
That's awesome. So you talked about batteries being a key enabler for this. I'm going to shift over to Adam,
Sure.
who has been an aviator for 40 years. He's got 4 degrees from Stanford. He's a builder, an investor, technologist, and has been on the journey with Google in their development of a drone delivery platform. And how many of you knew that Google has a drone delivery business? Okay, relatively small number, right? So share with this group a bit about that journey and maybe the key enablers that allowed it to happen.
So, well, let's step back and talk about why is drone delivery interesting. And I'm sure many of you have goods, services, food delivered to your home on a regular basis. And what you'll find is that you will order a small item, a shawarma, a coffee, a meal. And what happens is a car and a human being arrive 30 to 40 minutes later. Well, the embodied energy of that and the actual waste of human productivity is profoundly large, and it makes very little sense to send, particularly in the United States, a 5,000-pound vehicle to deliver a 4-pound meal. And yet, if you look at DoorDash, one of the largest providers of delivery service, they just crossed their 5 billionth delivery of food. So it stands to reason, from a first principles perspective, that if you could get a small device, a drone, to deliver goods and services, this would be a profoundly interesting idea. So about 10 years ago, a whole bunch of people started thinking about this. Amazon, Google, many private companies. And they sort of looked at the success of consumer drones, often Chinese, and said, you know, we could hang something underneath this and maybe deliver it. And it turns out that the drone really isn't the hard part. The hard part about making this work is sort of all the things that JoeBen alluded to. It's the avionics, it's the sense and avoid, it's the operating cooperatively in the airspace with full-scale aircraft, with new forms of aviation, at helicopters, but at a much higher density. Because you can imagine if DoorDash is doing 5 billion deliveries with cars or motorcycles, that drones would start to take this over quite rapidly. So what's happened over the last 10 years has been a real evolution in the systems thinking and the systems design of how do you integrate with a retailer? How do you construct a software environment that allows planes to deconflict automatically? How do you work with the regulatory bodies? This is something that JoeBen and I have talked about for a decade. And then ultimately, how do you deliver that as a service seamlessly to the general population?
So consumer acceptance and public acceptance is a big part of making this be successful. Let's talk about noise for a second. Adam, why don't you kind of go on that for a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of people worry, they have perhaps unnatural worries that a drone flying by their house regularly will be unpleasant or noisy or disruptive or invade their privacy in some way. But I can tell you now, from having done hundreds of thousands of deliveries in a variety of locations, that the transit speeds of between 70 and 90 miles per hour, the very short dwell time, the very short hover time by a home to lower a package, that the convenience outweighs most people's concerns. And when I say convenience, the modern drone delivery systems are delivering goods within 3 to 5 minutes of the time of order. So what we're finding in places where there's a great density of systems and drones, that people are ordering up to 3 times a day because it's significantly lower cost and it's significantly more convenient to get something in 5 minutes that you forgot at the store, or perhaps you want a hot coffee from your favorite barista. So the noise is a concern, and all of the providers have spent a great deal of time thinking about aeroacoustics, about the aircraft design, the propeller design, to think about it. JoeBen faces the same thing, and you've innovated there as well.
Let us hear about, well, before you go on that path, so a few years ago, I went to go visit JoeBen at his secret factory, which was in a mine quarry, which was something out of like a James Bond movie for those that have had a chance to see it, and had to fly in via helicopter, and then had the opportunity to watch his vehicle fly. And I've been around flying vehicles my entire life. And it was, as a third-party validator of seeing it fly, it was like the sound of an air conditioner in the background as it took off 100 yards away, which was extraordinary, going from one dynamic of the helicopter to your vehicle. And I know you spent a tremendous amount of time and engineering resources on this. So just take us through that journey and what that future looks like as we continue to see these things fly around.
Yeah, so this is having grown up in the country where it was really quiet, and I cherished the quiet. I wanted to build an aircraft that could blend into that sounded more like the wind in the trees than the wop-wop of a helicopter. And so we looked at both the absolute noise level, but also the quality of the sound. We wanted something that didn't have that impulsive nature of a helicopter, but that was low enough frequency that it didn't have the whine of a drone. And so we've done a lot of work on the design of the propellers, on slowing them down, delivering very, very high specific torque motors to be able to spin the propellers really slowly, but also the shape of the propellers and the spacing of the propellers to drive that acoustic characteristic. And again, it's something we've worked hard on, and it's something we will continue to hone over the years to come as we want to build aircraft that take you closer and closer to your destination.
Let's talk about economics. Helicopters are rather cost prohibitive for most people. So for this to work, we clearly have to be less than that and then some. Share with us what should people expect that the cost to, say, fly from here to Abu Dhabi, or give us an example that people can wrap their heads around on what this will look like.
So we are, cost and accessibility has been something that has been very core to us since starting the company 15 years ago. We wanted something that was not just a niche product, but something that was that could over time become widely accessible. And that was part of the thesis in designing an air taxi, so that you are depreciating the cost of the aircraft and the cost of the pilot over 4 passengers. That you are, and then the other component is because you're flying at 200 miles an hour, that pilot and that aircraft are much more productive in terms of the number of passenger miles per hour that they deliver, right? So if you're moving 400 passengers at 200 miles an hour and you're flying 50% of the time, you're delivering 400 passenger miles per hour compared to a ground vehicle which might be delivering 20 passenger miles per hour. And so that aircraft is then 20 times as productive as the car on the ground in terms of the number of the utility that it's providing to customers. And so that's one of the biggest drivers that reduces the cost that you can deliver. In terms of the specific pricing that we'll be delivering in our service here, that's something that we're continuing to work with the RTA and His Excellency on, and we'll launch that as we roll the service out.
Let's go to you, Adam, on
so
costing for drone delivery. What's going to cost me to get my coffee delivered to my house with your fancy drone?
Well, I mean, I think if you look broadly at the industry, Cyrus, the projections from very smart analysts have it going down to 25 cents a delivery in the not too distant future. Now, it didn't start there. So, I mean, drones that were very capable were quite expensive, and the systems were fairly bespoke. But they started in places that could tolerate expense. So a great example would be medical deliveries in geographies that are difficult to otherwise traverse. So let's take Africa, for example. In Rwanda, Zipline is delivering approximately 50% of the blood and high-value pharmaceuticals because in the rainy season, it can take up to 8 hours to get critical supplies to a satellite hospital, and a Zipline drone can be there in less than 30 minutes. And so the World Health Organization was willing to engage very broadly, and even that was significantly less expensive than a car and people and 8 hours and redundancy and fuel. In the developed world, if you think about the cost, the embedded costs of delivery, you have the depreciation on the vehicle, you have insurance, you have fuel, you have the human being. Today it's $12 or $13 if you're really good to deliver something. As a cost, drones are already below that, and they will trend dramatically lower as the systems scale. And scaling at this point is really not a technological barrier. It's really a regulatory situation.
Thank you for that wonderful segue. So why don't you start? Let's talk about the journey of, okay, here's the backdrop. You've got the largest aircraft manufacturer in the world, more or less, except duopoly between Airbus and Boeing, that has a hard time keeping the most voluminous aircraft ever built, the 737, in the air and out of the eyes of the regulator. So as a company that's developing completely new technologies, in this backdrop, tell us what that is like, and there's regulators in the room as well, and how they should be thinking about your technologies.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different dimensions to that. One is we've chosen to be very vertically integrated so that we control every aspect of both the quality of the design, the quality of the manufacturing that goes into building the aircraft, so that we can ensure that we have something that's incredibly safe. So that's on the aircraft side. We're also vertically integrated in the service side. So we're doing pilot training, we're doing maintenance, we're operating the aircraft, and the operations of the aircraft are actually more important to the overall safety than even the design of the aircraft. Both are really, really crucial, but if you look at operations today, and I've looked a lot at the data in the US, the way you operate it, the way you train the pilots is really crucial to delivering an incredibly safe service. So that's on one dimension of your question. The second dimension is on the regulator side. I think the way that we've constructed the partnership with the RTA and with the GCA is absolutely spectacular. We're using all the work that we've done, the foundation we've laid with the FAA. So this is the means of compliance, the methods of compliance, the area-specific certification plans, all of our test plans, and but the GCA and the RTA have brought to bear substantial resources to make sure that the last step in that process, the verification, is executed on very expediently. And so it is absolutely fantastic to see the lean in here from the government, from the regulators to deliver this service and to do it in an extraordinarily safe way. And again, that oversight doesn't end at the moment we get certified or the moment we begin operations. It's a continual process of evaluating every single piece. And so that is, again, being very vigilant as you're running the operation is crucial to delivering a spectacularly safe mode of transportation. I would also add that one of the amazing things about aviation is the standard to which we hold it on a global scale. Aviation is, at least in the US, is thousands of times safer per passenger mile traveled than ground transportation. So it is not only our fastest mode of transportation, our lowest cost mode of transportation, but also by far our safest mode of transportation.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's because 10 to the minus ninth. I mean, every component needs to be certified to an exceedingly rigorous standard, and that over the last 50 years has proven to be a really robust standard, very, very hard to maintain. So I want to talk about regulators on the small aviation side. And the interesting thing is the large divergence in approach across the world. There are countries like New Zealand where they're like, come on in, fly around, go for it, be really happy. Australia, really forward-looking, really embracing the idea of a relatively sparse population in a relatively large geography. So you'll see countries like Australia, like Finland, where they are excited to be the leaders and to allow a lot of these services to trial their wares. And so I can tell you that in the case of Google's work in Australia, go down to Logan, Australia, the wing service is embedded in daily life. Now, one of the things JoeBen talked about was the FAA in the United States. And you know, the FAA is a very conservative body, and rightly so. But I think over the course of a decade of work of people like Joben, of people like Zipline, of people like Wing, and many others, they have really come to have a framework for type certification and operating certificates. And most importantly, in the case of drones, because there is no pilot, they had to get comfortable with the idea of something called BVLOS, or beyond visual line of sight. So the drone had to be able to fly miles without a human observer. The way they started this was by requiring a human observer, so it wasn't any cheaper than perhaps a car, because you needed a pilot or a person to observe the drone through over the entirety of its flight. I'm really pleased to say that that has been relaxed, and a number of providers, whether they're in organ delivery, whether they're in consumer goods, whether they're in medical supplies, have been granted beyond visual line of sight from the FAA. There are still some funny anomalies that, for example, because the little drone is actually type certificated like an airplane and operated like a small air carrier, it requires somebody with an aircraft and power plant mechanics license to change parts on this little, what would otherwise be a toy. So there are still things to work out, but it's a process and it's moving.
So you guys both live in the Bay Area in California. And Silicon Valley has been the home of some of the most incredible technological innovations since the beginning of the sort of modern industrial age that we're in right now. Talk about the community required to build these types of companies. And you know, you're in the most fertile ground right now, but maybe a little bit about your experience in recruiting people, and also the sort of seeing the childlike light come on in kids' eyes that are coming to work for you, that are younger, right out of college. Share with the group about your experience in that capacity.
Yeah, so I mean, Silicon Valley, a place where I was born and raised, a place that I love dearly. It has been an incredible melting pot of ideas, welcoming of the most ambitious and brightest people from around the world to come and do the greatest work of their lives. And I think one of the things that I have very much chafed against for the past 20 or 30 years has been the increasingly restrictive and isolationist immigration policies that the U.S. has brought to bear. And I think, especially over the last decade, has been one of the things that I have seen as one of the spectacular accomplishments of the UAE, and the openness that Dubai has shown to the world. And you now see this city and this country as a magnet for ambitious people wanting to do breakthrough work. And so I think that the focus of the leadership here in this country to invest in and nurture, build a venture capital community, and is just enlightened. And I think Adam can speak maybe with a bit with his venture capital hat on, but I think building a nexus of next generation mobility here is, and the leadership from the RTA on aerial mobility, I think, can make this a nexus for this next age of aviation.
I'm going to go back a little bit. About a decade ago, I was having a conversation with the then President Obama, and he said, I really want to set up a venture capital community in Indiana. And I said, I don't think you can. And he said, why? And I said, because there are once-in-a-generation confluences, maybe longer than once in a generation. But if you think about Greece and the extraordinary artistic and scientific and creative productivity, if you think of Florence under the Medicis and the explosion of ideas and thinking, Paris in the 1920s, Silicon Valley for the last 30 years has mirrored all of those exceedingly rare instances. And it's a combination of a freedom to explore, an abundance of capital, as Joe Ben said, the embracing of heterogeneity. One of the things about Silicon Valley is that it is colorblind. It does not restrict anybody in any way, shape, or form. The only requirement is that you're intelligent and passionate and committed to changing the world. And I think that combination, I agree with Joe Ben. It exists here today in Dubai. I feel it when I visit. It is optimistic. It is hopeful. It is full of great change and portends well for the future.
Wonderful. That's, you've landed the airplane just about as good as you could there, Mr. Grosser. With that, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all of you for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the program.